Today we're diving into top 5 calls that changed the world. And trust me, these calls are as gripping as any thriller. Let's start with number 5 and work our way to the most monumental of them all. The Cuban Missile Crisis. October 1962. The world teetered on the brink of nuclear annihilation. For 13 days, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought humanity closer to its darkest hour. But what if I told you that one phone call, a single conversation, changed the course of history? It all began when American reconnaissance planes captured images of Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba. These missiles, capable of reaching major U.S. cities within minutes, sparked a showdown between two nuclear-armed superpowers. President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev were locked in a high-stakes game of chess. The U.S. Navy blockaded Cuba, tensions soared, and the world held its breath. But the real breakthrough didn't happen in the war rooms, it happened on a telephone line. As the crisis escalated, channels of communication were strained. Backdoor diplomacy wasn't enough. That's when Khrushchev sent a surprising personal message to Kennedy. In this letter, Khrushchev proposed a deal. The Soviets would withdraw their missiles from Cuba if the U.S. promised not to invade. But what sealed the deal wasn't just letters, it was a phone call. This was more than a negotiation. It was two leaders recognizing their shared humanity and their shared responsibility. The deal was struck. The Soviets removed their missiles from Cuba, and the U.S. secretly agreed to dismantle its missiles in Turkey. The crisis was over, and the call became a turning point in Cold War diplomacy. The aftermath wasn't perfect, far from it. But this crisis gave birth to the Hotline Agreement, a direct communication link between Washington and Moscow to prevent future catastrophes. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. June 28, 1914. A seemingly ordinary summer day in Sarajevo. But little did the world know, this day would spark a chain of events that would forever alter the course of history. This is the story of how a single bullet shattered empires, ignited a global conflict, and changed the world forever. Welcome to our deep dive into the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The early 20th century was a time of great tension in Europe. Empires were jostling for power, alliances were being forged and broken, and nationalism was on the rise. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a melting pot of ethnicities, struggling to maintain unity amidst growing calls for independence. At the heart of this empire was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the throne. Franz Ferdinand was no ordinary royal. Known for his progressive views and controversial marriage to Sophie Chotek, he envisioned a reformed empire where all ethnic groups had a voice. But not everyone shared his vision. In the shadows, a secretive group known as the Black Hand was plotting. Committed to the cause of Serbian nationalism, they saw Franz Ferdinand as a threat to their dreams of independence. Among their ranks was a young man named Gavrilo Princip. Princip and his co-conspirators were determined to make a statement. Armed with pistols and cyanide capsules, they devised a plan to strike during the Archduke's visit to Sarajevo. June 28 dawned bright and clear. Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie arrived in Sarajevo to cheers and celebrations. But danger lurked around every corner. The first attempt to assassinate the Archduke failed when a bomb was thrown at his car but bounced off, injuring bystanders instead. Shaken but undeterred, the royal couple continued with their schedule. Later that day, a wrong turn brought their car to a halt in front of Gavrilo Princip. Seizing his chance, Princip fired 2 shots. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were mortally wounded. By the time help arrived, both were dead. The assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia's response failed to satisfy, war was declared. Within weeks, alliances were activated, and the Great War engulfed the continent. World War I claimed millions of lives and redrew the map of Europe. The Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, and new nations emerged. The echoes of this conflict would resonate through the 20th century, leading to World War II and shaping the modern world. The Berlin Wall collapse. Today, Berlin is a thriving capital, united and free. But just over 3 decades ago, this city was divided. East Berlin under communist rule. West Berlin, a bastion of capitalism and democracy, surrounded by an impenetrable barrier, the Berlin Wall. For 28 years, the wall divided families, friends, and ideologies. It wasn't just concrete and barbed wire. It was a manifestation of the Cold War, the clash between the capitalist West and the communist East. Thousands risked everything to escape East Germany, the harsh reality of life behind the Iron Curtain prompting desperate attempts to cross the wall. But the wall wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a psychological one too. By 1989, change was in the air. Throughout Eastern Europe, communist regimes were weakening, and people were demanding more freedoms. By October 1989, protests had erupted across East Germany, demanding greater freedoms, better living conditions, and the right to travel freely. The government, in turmoil, tried to hold the line, but they were losing control. Then, on November 9th, a fateful press conference. A mistake, a slip of the tongue. Spokesman Gunter Schabowski announced, somewhat confusedly, that East German citizens could cross the wall. But no one was ready for what came next. People gathered at the wall, unsure of what was happening, but hungry for freedom. The border guards, unprepared and confused, opened the gates. Thousands streamed through, embracing what they dreamed of for nearly 3 decades. It was chaotic, it was emotional, and it was the moment the world had been waiting for. The wall, the physical and ideological barrier between East and West, began to crumble. In the days that followed, people didn't just cross. They tore down the wall. Pieces of it were chipped away, and they were carried around the world as symbols of newfound hope. The call of freedom rang out in 1989. It was a call that changed the world forever, and it's a call that still echoes today. The Arab Spring's catalyst. On December 17, 2010, a single act of defiance in a small town sparked a revolution that would ripple across an entire region. It was the call that changed the world, the Arab Spring. In Tunisia, a young street vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire in protest of police harassment and government corruption. His tragic act ignited the fury of a nation, and soon, an entire region would follow suit. But Bouazizi's death wasn't just a symbol of one man's despair. It represented the collective frustration of millions, from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya, Yemen, Syria, and beyond. His desperate cry for justice reverberated throughout the Arab world. In Egypt, Tahrir Square became the stage for one of the most powerful uprisings in modern history. A generation that had lived under oppressive regimes was no longer willing to stay silent. The streets became their voice, and they were heard. What started as a spark in Tunisia quickly spread. In Libya, Muammar Gaddafi's regime crumbled into a violent civil war. In Syria, peaceful protests turned into a devastating civil war, with global repercussions still felt today. In Yemen, the fight for freedom escalated into a brutal conflict. The Arab Spring, fueled by social media and the power of a connected world, became an unstoppable force. Social media played a pivotal role in the Arab Spring. The internet became a weapon of resistance, allowing everyday citizens to become journalists, spreading their message far and wide. It was a revolution powered by information, and the impact was undeniable. For world leaders, the Arab Spring was a wake-up call. Some countries responded with force, while others tried to ride the wave of change. But the struggle for freedom was far from over. Tunisia's revolution led to a new democratic government, but in many other countries, the fight continued, and in some cases, it escalated into devastating conflicts. 5 calls. 5 moments that altered the course of history. They remind us of the weight our words can carry and the power of communication in shaping our world. What other calls do you think deserve to be on this list? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from history. Until next time, stay curious.